Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a busy week in Scottish politics again, and there's lots to talk about as ever. I look forward to your comments as well. Do fire comments in. It's always good to hear from you. There's no one's joining me today, so there'll be more chance to interact with the comments. But where shall we start? I mean, all sorts of things going on at the moment. Well, let's start. I'm going to start there. The conference. I'm going to remind you of the Scottish Family Party conference. Do get your tickets. Let's get there. I haven't got the link available. Oh yes, I've got the link. Right. Let's just paste the link back into the comments. If you're on X, you can just go back a few posts and you will find that. Which reminds me, the thing I always keep forgetting to say during the live stream is if you'd like to share this or repost it or whatever you do on the social media platform you're on, then please do that, and then more people can tune in to watch. The viewing figures on our live stream, they fluctuate quite widely. Our highest was over 500. But sometimes, I think we'll probably build up to about 100 by the end today. But we've routinely had 200 or 300 as well. But it seems to come and go for no apparent reason. So if you share it, that is also the good. Certainly, if you could give it a like, that is all going to help. Right. Good evening. People are coming on there. Right. That's a new name. Trium infinitum. Okay. Right. I'm not quite sure how to translate that one from. Sounds like Latin, doesn't it? So enlighten me what that one means. So what's first up in my slides today? Oh, this is unbelievable. Have you seen this today? This is Kamala Harris in her election campaign. This is real. Okay, this is not some sort of spoof or something. This is real. So here we go. Right. So Kamala Harris says black men deserve a president who cares about making their lives better. Well, yes, yeah, I agree. I mean, doesn't everyone deserve a president who wants to make their lives better? Not sure why she needs to single out black men, but let's see what she's got in store for black men. What's special deal? So it says Kamala Harris will create an opportunity agenda for black men in particular. Okay, first of all, provide 1 million loans that are fully forgivable up to $20,000 for black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. Right, black entrepreneurs and others. What? There still have to be black people, I assume. This is still under the agenda for black men. So if you're a black man wanting to start a business, they will give you a loan of $20,000, and you know already before you even start that you don't really need to pay it back. If you don't pay it back, they're just going to forgive it. They're just going to write it off. So this is just an open invitation to scams, isn't it? So if you're a black man in America and Kamala Harris puts this policy into practice, all you have to do is put in some business plan that you're going to open up some sort of business or other, get you £20,000, and they're not going to want it back again. So there's going to be industrial scale fraud basically on this. But even so, the idea, yes, so the fact that you tell people in advance you're investing in their business, but you're already saying, don't worry if you don't pay it back, doesn't matter, then that's pretty irresponsible, isn't it? But it's targeted at black men in particular. So what's this going to happen? Let's say, imagine you're a white woman who's got a business idea, or let's say you're a Hispanic, you're a Mexican woman who's got a business idea. You might apply, you'll want to apply, you'll want some funding, but the government will say, no, not for you. You're not a black man. So basically, get lost. We're not interested in you. This is for black men. Now, how are those people going to feel? Are they really going to say, that's fair enough, the black men should get priority? Now, maybe some people on the pretty far left political views, they might think that's quite right. That's exactly what we should be doing. But the vast majority of people will be thinking this is totally wrong. And it will generate racial tension in the same way that this sort of special treatment generated racial tension in the UK as well. So that's bad idea number one. They get worse, though. They get worse. Right. Support education, training, and mentorship programs that lead to good paying jobs for black men, including pathways to become teachers. Now, that's something that's basically good, apart from the problem that is targeting one ethnic and one sex. I mean, that's what makes it wrong. Why should this just be for black men. Surely, there'll be some black men in America who are the sons of very, very wealthy people, and to use the contemporary parlance, they're extremely privileged. They've had an awful lot going for them. I say very privileged upbringing, immensely wealthy. Maybe their family owns huge businesses, and all they need to do is to walk into those businesses. They've got massive opportunities, fantastic connections. They've been to the most prestigious private schools in America, but because they're a black man, then there's going to be a special system for them to get ahead in their career. Totally wrong, totally unfair, totally wrong. Now, this number 3 is, I couldn't believe this when I read it. It says, protect cryptocurrency investments so black men who make them know their money is safe. I mean, I'm lost for words on that. Cryptocurrency, as I'm sure you're aware, is quite a new thing, and you can invest your money in it. And the one thing that you need to know about cryptocurrency is that it's volatile. Its value fluctuates wildly. There are always new forms of cryptocurrency being introduced, and you can invest in them. I'm not sure, speculate on them might be a better word. And sometimes they might just peter away and be worth absolutely nothing. Sometimes their value might skyrocket. Sometimes it might fall to virtually to zero again. But even the biggest ones like Ethereum and Bitcoin, they still fluctuate pretty wildly. So that's cryptocurrency. That's the deal. Would you like to invest in it? Well, any sensible person would say no, unless I've got some particular expertise in this area. And also no, unless I can actually afford to lose this money, or I can spread the odds across a wide portfolio of cryptocurrencies. So there are ways of making it a bit safer. But for some people, they just see it as a get-rich-quick scheme. So they'll hear, so-and-so spent $1,000 on Bitcoin in such and such a year, and now it's worth $50,000. And some people might think, all right, I want a piece of that. Fear of missing out, I think they call it. Right, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin as well, and that's going to make me rich. And then, surprise, surprise, in many cases, it doesn't. People lose their money. Now, in other words, the problem seems to be here, basically, unintelligent investment, reckless, unintelligent investment. So if that's going on a large scale in your country, if that's causing a problem, in particular for poorer people, then that's something where the government might like to try to educate people, might try to make more information available to help people make the right decisions. And maybe would start to regulate the marketing of cryptocurrencies. That's the sort of thing a government might choose to do in response to this problem. But oh no, not Kamala Harris. She's got a different plan. She's saying, black men, invest in cryptocurrency as much as you like, and then we're going to make sure your money's safe. We, the government, are going to make sure your money's safe. So the latest wacko cryptocurrency that comes out, if you're a black man, buy $10,000 worth of it, and then when it's worth like $13 2 weeks later, the government will say, don't you worry, we'll give you, basically we'll make your money up to what you invested. So it's taking away the risk of investing in cryptocurrencies. So if the value explodes, then great, the black men are going to have lots of money. If the value goes down, well, they don't need to worry. And so basically, if you're a black man in America under Kamala Harris's scheme, then basically you should invest every penny you've got in cryptocurrency, because there's no risk of it going down, and it may go up widely. So cryptocurrency, that's the balance. Possibility of very high return, possibility of very big loss. But under Kamala Harris, the possibility of a big loss is eliminated. So throw the whole thing at it. Put all your money in cryptocurrency. I mean, that's one of the most ridiculous policies I've ever heard from any government. And that's spoken by someone living in Scotland. So this is really, really remarkable. But I would say what that's doing is it's saying the idea that you're going to educate black men so that they invest intelligently, it's as though Kamala Harris is saying, well, obviously that's a lost cause. We can't possibly expect that. It's inevitable black men are going to be really stupid and irresponsible with their money, but the government can sort it out. That's what she's effectively saying. So absolutely crazy, crazy policy. And imagine that. So you've got two people. Let's say you've got a black man and a black woman, let's say, and they both decide to invest $1,000 in some cryptocurrency, and it goes down in value, but the man gets his money back and the woman doesn't. So you're going to say, fair enough. Kamala Harris is good. She's looking out for the black men. So the fact that this scheme is completely unjust on any other measure, I don't mind. Really, I don't think so. Absolutely staggering. Right, the next one. Launch a national health initiative focused on the illnesses that disproportionately impact Black men. Right, that shouldn't be a policy. That should just be a standard part of health policy in a nation, because different races actually tend to suffer from different diseases. And in some cases, they respond to drugs and treatments in a different way as well, which raises very complicated issues actually within a health system. So think about it in Britain, for example, let's say there's an illness and you're going to research a treatment for it. You might research it with, say, white people, and you might find a treatment that's very effective. You might have spent a certain amount of money on that. Should you then spend the same amount of money trying to find a treatment that's tuned in particular for Black people, even though there's only a 20th as many of them? Then you have to do that for every race. And what's fair? Is the fair way to spend an equal amount on every race, or is the fair way to spend it proportionately according to the number of people in those races? Or is the best way to cooperate across international borders? Well, that seems a pretty sensible thing to do. But obviously, if one group is suffering from an illness in particular, then you could have policies to try and focus on that group, educate that group, warn that group about them, encourage them to get tested. That sort of thing, it should be just routine health policy, as it is in Britain, and I would imagine it is in America as well. But Kamala Harris wants to say, no, this is a special thing for Black men. Now, this happens in the UK and in Scotland with women, very much so. The emphasis on women's health and women's health issues is disproportionate because of feminist influence. The government wants to say, we're on the side of women. What do we do for women? What are our women's policies? We're putting extra money into, and it will be illnesses that only women suffer from. So that results in a skew in health funding in Britain. But Kamala Harris wants to go down that road with regard to Black men. All right, now how about this for the last one? And if you thought so far, this is pretty bizarre, how about this? This is to create an opportunity agenda for Black men. Legalize recreational marijuana. That's going to create an opportunity agenda. So this drug that causes mental health problems, it basically leads people down a road to being dropouts in many cases, non-contributors to society, or whatever the right term you're supposed to use. But it is not a positive impact on people's lives and on their citizenship. But Kamala Harris thinks that legalizing marijuana will create opportunities for Black men. And why is that? Well, she goes on. Because it will also create opportunities for Black Americans to succeed in this new industry. That sounds a bit like, to me, lots of Black Americans are drug dealers, and so we're going to legalize it so they'll really be able to build up their businesses and flourish. Then we'll have created opportunities for Black men. I mean, I would say if I was in a country and the leader said, we're going to legalize drugs to give special opportunities to white men, then they can be drug dealers and build up businesses that way, I would be appalled that anyone would suggest that. That's it's beyond the. So it's basically saying that availability of these drugs, harmful drugs, is a good thing. That's the way she's going to help and give the Black men a step up in America, is by making drugs more freely available and encouraging them to be drug dealers. I mean, I suppose just sometimes it's good to see something that's crazier than what we're facing in Scotland. But that is, as I say, just absolutely beyond the pale. Right, let's have a look at a few comments here. The Black entrepreneurs could invest in crypto. Yes. Yeah. What percentage Black do you need to be to qualify? Well, that's a very good question, isn't it? I mean, that's the sort of question that the Nazis agonized over at great length, didn't it? They had their tables and charts to work out, if you were 3/16th Jewish, then that made you Jewish. But if you're only 1/8, then you weren't. I mean, they went into it and became quite wasn't a science, obviously, but became quite a mathematical, the way they were trying to calculate who counts as a Jew, who counts as Aryan, etc., etc. But that's the sort of decision-making process that will need to be put in place. So maybe you might apply for a grant or one of these loans. Maybe you'll have to do some sort of DNA test with it. But of course, don't forget, according to Kamala Harris, probably race is a social construct. So a black man is a man who says they're black, who identifies as black. That's probably what it would come down to. But let's remember, of course, what's the definition of a man? Well, the definition of a man is a person who identifies as a man. So, yeah, good question. Good question. Yeah, that's an interesting thing I saw, isn't it? Quite remarkable. Right, good question. Is she going to be interviewed on these policies? No, I'm sure she'll avoid that like the plague. Again, isn't that just bizarre? You can have a candidate to be president of the United States and they're avoiding being interviewed, avoiding a genuine probing journalistic interview. Just an incredible situation that we're in there. Robert, just before we go, Robert, I saw on Facebook that you went to see Mahler's Second Symphony in Glasgow, I think. I went to see it in Edinburgh last week as well, as a birthday present. It was really good. I agree with your Facebook post. It really was excellent. But right, moving on. Now, the Scottish government is quite behind the scenes. They're having a review of abortion law. And they've made it clear in the outline, in the terms of this review, they've put in it that this review will the only possible outcomes are basically liberalization of abortion law. It cannot move things in the other direction. They've said that before they even start. This is a one-way street. It is to liberalize abortion law. So this is going to carry on. I mean, will it come to a head before the next Scottish election? I really think it will. I think it will. And my guess would be they'll try and introduce decriminalization of abortion. And obviously it would pass with no problem at all in the Scottish Parliament. It would pass with a huge majority. And the post here is from the Roman Catholic Political Office, or anyway, the Bishops' Conference, rather, have made a submission to this consultation. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? The Scottish government has effectively said to the Catholic bishops, you're wrong and we're going to go in the wrong direction as far as you're concerned. Would you like to contribute to our consultation? And the Bishops' Conference of Scotland very graciously have done, even though the government's already told them that they're not going to listen to them. So they have made a submission that is very, very good. It's excellent. So well done to them for doing that. I think that's quite important, isn't it? I mean, if someone asks you for your view, I think you give it. Even if you know they're going to completely ignore it, then it's your job. I'd say it's their job as the church. It's their duty as a church to put forward their beliefs when they're invited to do so and when they're not invited to do so. So it was good to see that happening. Humza, Yousaf. I'll tell you, I'm no fan of John Swinney. You're probably not a huge fan of John Swinney either. But if I had to say one positive thing about John Swinney, it's that he's not as bad as Humza Yousaf. Could you imagine if Humza Yousaf was still the First Minister of Scotland through the last year? It would have been absolutely excruciating. So he is race obsessed. He is Palestine obsessed. He totally out of control, the things he's been saying. The most extreme thing recently was this, the Israeli tactic of rigging it so that Hezbollah, the terrorists in Hezbollah, so that their personal communication devices exploded, for example, in their pocket or in their own hands while they were holding them. And Humza Yousaf described that as an indiscriminate attack. Indiscriminate attack. I mean, that's what would you put that down to? And is that just not being able to think clearly about what you're saying issue? Or is that someone who is so full of anger and hostility that he can't control what he's saying? He's just emoting in what he says on this issue. I think it is probably that. Anyway, Black History Month. So Humza Yousaf has chipped in. Scotland regrettably played a leading role in the British Empire, an empire that enslaved and forcibly transported millions of people from Africa to British colonies. If we do not teach our history, well, there's no chance of that, because in schools, the focus is definitely on everything that's critical of the history of Britain. Britain's a really bad country. That's like the core element of a lot of the curriculum. But Humza Yousaf just bangs on again and again. When will we ever hear him saying something positive? When will he talk about Britain abolishing slavery, miles ahead of the curve, of the Royal Navy suppressing the slave trade worldwide, and the British Empire spending a huge sum of money at a time when it could little afford it as well, particularly during the Napoleonic Wars, to suppress the slave trade? Really things to be proud of. Okay, British Empire as well, I would say a very mixed enterprise. In a lot of places, it did a lot of good, and that good lasts to today. And in other places, a lot of things went wrong, a lot of bad things done. But overall, I think it's a very mixed picture at worst, I would say, but a lot of positives from it. Humza Yousaf would never dream of giving any sort of balanced, nuanced view on it. Same with the Israel-Gaza situation or Israel-Hezbollah situation. You would never hear any sort of balanced, even-handed assessment of the situation. He's just driven by, well, I call it tribal allegiance. And that's the best way to describe it. And sometimes I find it quite frightening, because you get the impression that if I was to sit down with Humza Yousaf and try and talk to him about it, how do you think it would go? I just think it wouldn't go well at all. I don't think he'd be capable of just entering into a rational, sensible discussion of the issue and listening to what I had to say and respond. I just don't think he's capable. I just think he would become angry and he'd call me racist, and he'd just lose the plot. So, yeah, as I say, we can thank our lucky stars that he is not the First Minister anymore. I mean, sometimes in Scottish politics, there's not a huge amount of good news, but that is certainly one of them. Okay, I was having a quick look at the comments. Got another Marla fan there. Yeah, very good. It's probably finished that performance. I think it was in Edinburgh on Friday night. I think it was in Glasgow on Saturday. Do they sometimes go to Perth or something as well, or Dundee? I'm not sure. Okay, Humza Yousaf as well. I mean, let's just mention it while we're at it. I mean, still, I'm completely confident in saying that Humza Yousaf was having an affair at some point in the recent past. I'm very confident in saying that. He managed to keep it out of the press, but I'm absolutely confident in saying that. And yeah, it's just ongoing tale of the SNP. Right. What have we got? Oh, yeah, John Mason. Now, I made a video about this yesterday. I'm not going to repeat what I said in the video. John Mason's been expelled from the SNP. Now, I've put in the title, The John Mason Mystery. I'll tell you what the John Mason mystery is. The John Mason mystery is John Mason has been saying he'll stay in the Parliament as an independent MSP, but he will still support the SNP in every way he can. Okay, so the party that's just expelled him, he's invested a huge portion of his life serving, supporting, promoting this party, and have they repaid him? They've kicked him in the teeth and thrown him out for a reason that is absolutely wrong. John Mason says something completely reasonable, and the SNP is totally wrong. So how does John Mason respond to that? Now, you might say you might be gracious and forgiving. Okay, well, I think in politics, okay, let's say that. Let's say you want to be gracious and forgiving. You could say, I think the SNP is completely wrong about that, but, I'll forgive them for that. But to still be saying you're going to actively support them, actively support a party that's throwing you out, that just seems strange. So it's like saying, this party has kicked me out because I said something sensible, and this party is so extreme in its viewpoints on this issue that they kicked me out, but I still support the SNP. In other words, it's effectively that he's saying, if you're thinking of joining the SNP, I really do recommend it. It's the party to join. I support the SNP. And the John Mason mystery, as far as I'm concerned, is how can he say that? How can he be urging people to vote for, to join even, to get involved in, to try and become an MSP or whatever, an MP within the SNP? How can you encourage people down the road that ends the way it has for John because he says sensible things? I mean, in a sense, John's outspoken. In another sense, he's very... the words that come to mind are always the wrong words. The words that come to mind are like timid. But he's not timid, but he's very restrained and temperate and gentle in the way he says things. So he's sort of outspoken in a way, but in another sense, he is very diplomatic. And what he says is very careful. He doesn't really, sock it to them the way that I might in some of these discussions. But even with that, they've still kicked him out. And he still says, I support the SNP. So in other words, I guess that's still saying to everyone in Scotland, if you want a party, you're going to join a party, I recommend the SNP. Come and join the SNP. If you have sort of sensible middle of the road views about Israel, Palestine, come and join. Not come. You should be go and join the SNP. Go and join the SNP like I did, and then maybe they can kick you out like they kicked me out. I just don't understand. I do not understand the thinking that gets there. I was thinking, well, good question. Is he going to appeal this case? The last I heard, he was considering that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he does appeal. I would be very, very surprised if they let him back in. Because if they hadn't have expelled him, there would have been hell to pay from the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish section of the SNP, which is basically like almost all of the SNP. So if they hadn't expelled him, there would have been massive problems for the SNP. They'd have had a mutiny on their hands. So if they expel him to keep these people happy and then let him back in, whoa, they would be more angry than when they started. So I don't think it's tenable for the SNP to let him back in. So he may appeal, but I would be very, very, very confident they're not going to let him back in. So it's a cult who's been conditioned to support it. Well, I guess if you're within an organization for decades and decades, then it does become a bit like your family, doesn't it? And I'm sure John's got, a lot of other connections and networks of people, but a big part of his life has been in the SNP. So the thought of being like expelled, being cut off from that, excommunicated from this big sort of family, and that must be quite traumatic. But I think with politics is not a club. That political parties have policies; they stand for principles, and John Mason must now realise that the SNP's principles and his principles are not compatible. The SNP says so. So for John Mason still to be saying, I'm going to support the SNP, I cannot fathom it. I cannot understand the thinking that gets to that process. But we shall see. Maybe we'll have to see how things develop in the future. Right. What's next? The drug consumption room in Glasgow. Apparently it's built. I've had a look at it on Google Maps. You can see the building there, and it's due to open anytime soon. There's been a delay in it. So that's where people are going to go along, take their illegal drugs and not be prosecuted for it. It's going to be a sort of law-free zone that has been created. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is I think what it creates, a drug consumption room, creates what is called a moral hazard, in that it insulates people from the risk of their risky, the consequences of their risky behavior. If you're going to take illegal drugs, then you're taking risks. One of the risks is you might go out there and stab someone. You might go out of the place, jump in a car and go and run over a family. You might go home and accidentally set your flat on fire and burn the whole block down. You might go out and commit all sorts of other crimes, steal money for your drugs, etc. So there's that risk. There's another risk as well, and that's the risk to yourself. That the drug might not be quite what you thought you were buying, that it might have a negative effect on you. You might catch some disease from the way you're injecting it. You might have some negative consequences through overdose or through prolonged addiction, etc. So there's two sets of risks there. What the Scottish government is trying to do is to say, we're going to reduce the risks to you personally. Now, I've got a bit of a problem with that, because what about the risks to everyone else? They still say the same. So if a person's weighing up, should I take drugs or not? Should I try and get off them, or should I keep taking them? Then if it's less risky to take them, then common sense says people will be more likely to say, okay, taking drugs is not so dangerous after all. I'll keep taking them. How does that affect the rest of society? Well, it tends to affect them negatively more. If you imagine that there was a drug that was totally safe, it had no side effects, It was not addictive, but the only thing it did is it made you sky high, and you had a great time, but you acted totally irresponsibly while you were high. You were a danger to other people, but there were no health risks to yourself in it. That would be the most dangerous drug ever invented, because it would potentially become so popular. Because people would think, I can take this, there's no risk to me, the risk is just to other people. So I'm going to go ahead. And that's what the Scottish government is trying to produce. But another example of this, I heard someone say, if you imagine someone invented a pill that could just cure drunkenness instantly. So you could go out for the night, have 8 pints or whatever, but then at the end of the night, take a pill and it sobered you up totally. No hangover, no after effects. You were totally sober and you could drive yourself home. Now, people might initially think, oh, that'd be a great thing. That would cut down on drink driving. It would cut down on people making a nuisance of themselves as they go home. It would cut down on accidents. It would cut down on violence, when pubs close or whatever. They say this is obviously a good thing. But actually, it will be a bad thing. It will be harmful because more people would get outrageously, irresponsibly drunk because some of the negative consequences for them were taken away. And that's what's going to happen with this drug consumption room as well. Right, just a reminder, do share and like whatever social media platform you're watching on. Say if you can repost, give other people a chance to watch, that would be good. And just while I remember, I'll give another reminder to the conference as well, 9th of November, Scottish Family Party Conference. I will repost the link. It's only the afternoon, and it's not in the city centre of Glasgow, but it's near to the city centre. Just the afternoon, then we've got a drinks reception with some nibbles afterwards. So do come along. We've got a guest speaker, Andrea Williams, the CEO of Christian Concern, is coming to speak. Christian Concern, obviously a Christian organisation, but they focus on a lot of the issues that the family party focuses on as well. So a lot of our focus areas are shared with Christian Concern. So Andrea Williams is going to be speaking. So we're really looking forward to that. So get your tickets and come along. I've been sharing a few of these recently, just popping up the occasional slide on these sort of topics. That's a graph of global fertility rates. Now, obviously, as you know, a fertility rate of about 2.1 is a replacement level. Your population will remain stable. Now, looking at those, look at the countries in red. So we've got South Korea. The other couple look like tiny countries. I'm not exactly sure which ones they are. One of them might be Hong Kong, actually, the one at the bottom of China. They've got fertility rates below 1. South Korea's fertility rate is something like 0.7 something, 0.71 or 0.76 or something. I mean, that is just catastrophic. Your nation is going to disappear in pretty sharp order with a fertility rate like that. So the South Korean government, the last I heard, they were offering something like $78,000 US dollars equivalent to people to have a baby. They really are desperate to solve this problem. But then going up to the pink section, well, that's basically most of the world, isn't it? And the 1 to 1.9. So if you're down at 1, that's absolutely catastrophic. If you're 1.9, okay, that's not too bad. Scotland, remember, is about 1.29, somewhere around there. So Scotland is towards the catastrophic end of the demographic decline spectrum. Then we get the blue ones that are, sustaining their population. Remember China? We always used to think, China, the population of China is going up and up and up. Well, not anymore. It's going down, and it's going to fall off a cliff a little bit as well, because they're one-child policy. So the population of China is going to decline very dramatically, which is an extremely serious problem for them. They're doing everything they can to sort it out, but it's not going very well. India's population will grow a bit more. But look where people are really going to come from here going forward. I mean, Central Africa is where very large families. But even there, fertility rates are declining. So a country that's now got a fertility rate maybe of, say, 5, which is very, very high, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, it was 8. So even in these African countries, fertility rates are going down. Now, it's interesting is some people have this, the great replacement theory, that the people who control the world, normally the Jews, that they control, and they've got this plan to replace the white people. So they're getting black people to come and to move to white majority countries to take over. And it's some sinister plan to do away with white people. Well, it's not a sinister plan. I mean, basically, so white people are doing away with themselves through not reproducing. So white population is going to go down. And if these countries are going to, unless they can turn that around, then the only way to sustain their economies and their services is going to have at least a very substantial degree of inward migration on an ongoing basis. And where's it going to come from? Well, you can see that's where it's going to come from. There's going to be people from Africa in particular. Now, the family party's got policies that are intended quite aggressively to enable people or to encourage people to have as many children as they would like to. Because most people in Britain, most people across the developed world, if you say to them, let's say when they get to say 40 years old or 45 or whatever, how many children would you have liked to have? They'll often say, for example, 3. Then you say, how many children have you actually had? And they might say 1 or 2. So there's various factors within our society that result in people not having as many children as they might, as they wanted to. So family party policies, let's try and remove these barriers. Also, let's try and celebrate parenthood and family life instead of it being demonized, as the BBC, etc., are keen on doing. So that might help turn things around. Yeah, hopefully that's an interesting little insight. Did you see this? This is a bit of a niche story. It was in the media there, reported. So they've got the plan. Some people have got the plan of reintroducing wild cattle to Scotland. So these cattle, apparently they're relatively safe. They haven't got a record of like going stabbing people with their horns there. So they want these wild cattle to be wandering around Scotland. And this is going to be good for the environment and it's going to help the fight against climate change. Now, I find it really difficult to understand why wild cattle help in the fight against climate change, whereas cattle that you milk and get meat from and leather, that they're actually like productive, useful farm animals, they cause climate change. I can't quite get that. It seems to me that anything that environmentalists want, they can find some way of saying it tackles climate change. Anything that they don't like eating meat or industry or people making money out of it or whatever, then they'll find a way of saying that increases climate change. So the idea that wild cattle are going to help tackle climate change and agricultural cattle do the opposite, I just do not believe it. I don't believe it. And I think, again, people in the extreme of the environmental movement, they demonstrate what they're really driven by. They demonstrate that their concerns are not really rational. I was watching a TV program a while ago, and it was about a country park, basically, and it had got a lake in it, and there were trees around the lake, and they got water birds and different animals around. And what they did is they reintroduced beavers. They deliberately released a population of beavers, and they flourished. They're fine. The population started reproducing itself. And do you know what the beavers did? They started chewing through the trees, so the trees fell over and died. Now, have you ever heard an environmentalist say, "Oh, dead trees killed, that's really what we want. That's really good for the environment and biodiversity. Well done to people going around cutting trees down"? No. But when the beavers do it, when the beavers chew through trees and the trees fall over, this was wonderful for biodiversity. The fallen trees provided habitats for all sorts of insects and birds. It was just absolutely wonderful how the environment was enhanced by having beavers chewing through trees and basically cutting them down. And I just don't believe it. You're showing that you're not giving a balanced assessment of what's going on here. And the environmental movement, these extremists, undermine the credibility of their own movement. And that's the case there. Now, what's your view? Would you like to see wild cattle around in Scotland? Wild wolves, I would say I do not want them in Scotland because I think they'd be dangerous. You can introduce wild wolves, but eventually you'll get some kiddie killed. And more than one occasion. And it would make the outdoors dangerous. So when you're going to go walk up a Munro, say, if you have to think, all right, there might be wolves, right? I think that would be a shame. That would result in people not enjoying the outdoors in the way they currently do, because there would be just that extra risk. Cattle, if they really were docile, I don't know. I suppose more animals would be interesting. I'd be quite happy for that. What's anyone else think? Anyone else be keen to see these this wild cattle returning to Scotland? I guess overall, yeah, probably would be if they were docile, but no one's going to convince me that it's going to be good for climate change, having them wandering around. Okay, I've got a couple of videos to show you in a minute, but we'll get to those in a little while. In fact, why don't we have one of the videos now? Let's watch this. This is interesting. Here we go.
He does look like Tory.
Yeah, that's the big man.
SNP.
John Swinney, SNP.
Oh, that's Heatable and Holyrood Swinney.
It's obviously Swinney. Ali Rennie.
Yeah, Swinney.
Leader of the Scottish Conservative Party.
Leader of the Labour Party.
The Tory man.
Aye, the Labour man.
And the Salmond. I've seen them, but I couldn't tell you what.
That's the Greens guy.
The wee Greens man.
That's the Greens.
Oh, God. No, I can't remember their names.
Lorna and Patrick.
Lorna Slater. She's Canadian, is she not?
No.
He looks like a Tory.
This one is the Tory leader now.
Is he the new leader of the Conservatives?
Russell Finlay, ex-Sun journalist. No idea.
Is he the Liberal guy?
I think he's a Lib Dem guy. Yeah.
Nice eyes.
Oh, yes. And Cole Hamilton.
And finally,
Alex Salmond.
Salmond.
Ex-King Egg.
Alex Salmond.
That's the salmon man.
Oh, everybody.
Alex Salmond.
Oh, he's... never seen him before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know Alex. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, you've got them all.
Yeah, no one else has even got close. No. That's true.
It was interesting, wasn't it? I found that quite reassuring. We sometimes talk in the family party about how many people have heard of us, how many people know the family party name. We did an opinion poll. 2020 we did it. The opinion poll was about something else, but we tagged a question on the end. Have you heard of the Scottish Family Party? And we got 9%, of which some were definitely, some were, I think so. Yeah, but overall, adding them all together, it was 9%. But that was a few years ago. So I would hope we'd be, judging by knocking on people's doors, I would say we're maybe 30, 40%. Quite a lot of people have heard of us. But it was interesting listening to that, wasn't it? The people did not recognize, for example, Anna Sawa. I mean, one bloke didn't even recognize John Swinney. Another one didn't, a couple of them didn't recognize Anna Sawa. Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Lib Dems. It's suddenly gone bright. I don't know what's going on there. Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Lib Dems. Yeah, virtually unknown. One woman there said she thought he'd got nice eyes. Please don't tell him that, because I think he is. I think he does have quite a high opinion of his appearance. I was on a Zoom thing with him once, a Zoom hustings. And when he wasn't speaking, obviously when you're on Zoom, you can see yourself on the camera. When he wasn't speaking, he was sort of doing this all the time, just sort of sizing himself up there. Yeah, so it's interesting to see that lack of awareness. So for the family party, sometimes when we say, have you heard of the Scottish Family Party? And someone says no, we might think, oh, no. But it's interesting. There's one bloke who couldn't recognize John Swinney. But I guess with those other things, people probably know the party name, even if they don't know the name of the leader. But would it be fun to go to a city centre and just to do a survey like that, to try and film people and ask them, do you know these parties, or do they recognise the logo, or have they heard of these parties, or what do they know about these parties? That'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? That'd be quite fun. I'm up for doing that. So watch this space. We'll have some video about that. The other thing as well, at the end of course, there was Alex Salmond. Everybody recognised Alex Salmond. And that's the way public awareness works. To really enter public awareness, you don't do it by, getting in the newspapers once a week, or being on Question Time a couple of times in the year or something. You've got to be in the newspapers like every day. You've got to be on the TV news every day, more or less, for years. That's the way you really become a public figure. That everyone recognizes you, everyone knows it, and people can say a little bit about you. They've made up their mind about you. They know the things you stand for, maybe, etc. But it takes an awful lot to get through to the majority of the population who don't make any effort to find out about politics. Now, Alex Salmond, of course, that was a shock, wasn't it? That Alex Salmond died this week. An assessment of him, I think, is obviously extremely talented, gifted politician. It's interesting with people like that. You can watch them performing and try and work out, what is it that he's got. I just think he came across as being quite warm. And when he spoke, he just sounded credible. He sounded like he'd looked into this, and what he was saying is making sense. He was confident in it. And the way he was saying it, it was as though you really felt like you should be confident in what he was saying as well. And so a real talent there, very intelligent man. In terms of his personal qualities, I think what came out in the latter years, and it was sad, but it was obviously not good. His trial, he was let off the hook in the trial, but in order to defend him, even his own lawyer had to be very critical of his moral standards, shall we say. So it's a real unfortunate side to him as well. And I think it was obvious within the SNP that during that run up to the independence referendum, that no one would say anything because the objective is independence. You put up with anything because we're aiming for independence. Then you get Nicola Sturgeon and all the goings on with in the SNP, same sort of philosophy. You can put up with anything for the sake of independence. Is that what's happening with John Mason? To be honest, I don't really think so. But some people looking might think that seems like what it is. That because the SNP is for independence, so he's going to be for the SNP because independence is the main thing. All these other issues don't really matter. So that's quite a change in Scottish politics. With the Alba Party, it's obviously, it's more than a massive blow for the Alba Party. The Alba Party got quite a lot of publicity because Alex Salmond says is a news story. Even if there's no such thing as the Alba Party, Alex Salmond says is likely to be a news story. So that's been a massive boost to the Alba Party. And without him, I think they will really, really struggle. Another thing with the Alba Party was driven by three things, I would say, roughly speaking. One was Alex Salmond devotees, people who followed him, admired him in decades gone by and wanted to stick with him. Particularly when Nicola Sturgeon had to go at him, they were on Alex Salmond's side. That's where your loyalty was. So you join Alba as an expression of that. And a lot of people within Alba, I would say, they will not stand to hear Alex Salmond criticized. He really is, a sort of messianic figure to them. He's above the usual run of politics. It's hero worship, to the point. They really are extremely devoted to him. The other things Alba stands for, I would say it's like quite extreme Scottish independence speak. When the SNP say, how can we try and get a referendum? We don't really know how, but that's what we need to do to get a referendum. But Alba say, well, that's not good enough. We've got to, it's not quite clear what they do, but it's quite concerning that the way they talk, it's as though we've got to take this into our own hands some way. What the SNP is doing, trying to work through proper channels, well, that's not working. We need to do something else, but we're not quite clear what it is. So I think it's fading into the territory where you might become quite concerned. What are these people actually planning? What would they do? If someone came up with a proposal of a way of gaining independence that wasn't constitutional, so we put it that way, how many of these people would say, no, that's right, that's going too far, we can't do that? And how many of them would say, well, we have to do it. It's the only way to achieve freedom. I'd be quite concerned. And the third element of the Alba Party is opposing gender recognition reform. I wouldn't even say they oppose the ideology of transgenderism, but they've got a narrow focus, basically the feminist angle, that they object to gender recognition reform and like men and women spaces, etc. So it's the narrow feminist angle on transgender issues. They're the three things behind Alba. A couple of other things to know about Alba. Its membership is about 7,500. And if I'm remembering rightly, when the Electoral Commission published the donations in the last year or run up to the election campaign or something, Alba donations £750,000. So let's put it this way. The Alba Party has got more members by a very, very large margin, and it's got more money by a very, very, very large multiple than the Scottish Family Party. But how do they do in terms of votes? Well, they get about twice as many votes as the Family Party. In the last council election, I think we got 1.35 and they averaged 1.78 or something. So we weren't far behind them. I haven't actually done the sums for the last general election, but I think that they were maybe between 1 and 2%. We were about 1%. So if they're lucky, they may be getting twice as many votes as us, while they're spending, what? How many times as much money? 15 times as much money? So as a pouring money down the sink operation, the Alba Party, I think, is unmatched in Scottish politics. I think the pounds per vote measure, I think the Family Party is a lean, mean fighting machine. And on a membership to votes ratio as well, I think we're extremely effective on those bases. So, yeah, do join the Family Party. If you're not a member or if you're not a regular donor, do join. Do join. We would appreciate your support. Okay, yeah, so that was interesting. Let's stick with the video. Let's have another video here. So this is from the Scottish Parliament, and it's Fergus Ewing, the SNP MSP, speaking. Fergus Ewing has come up to retirement. He's been suspended from the SNP once. To be honest, it seems to me like he's on a suicide mission. It's as though he's certainly demob happy. I wouldn't say he's trying to get himself kicked out, but he's certainly been pretty unrestrained and undiplomatic the way he's speaking his mind. So have a listen to this.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on whether it will review any guidance in relation to the teaching of gender identity in schools in light of the Cass report.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring that this guidance remains up to date and fit for purpose, and as with any significant legal or policy development, we will consider whether the guidance requires to be updated to reflect these. This will include any of the findings from the Cass Review Implications for Scotland report, which are relevant within a school's context.
Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, Dr. Hilary Cass said that social transition is not a neutral act, yet teachers with no experience in this area allow pupils to socially transition and indeed are encouraged to do so by the Supporting Transgender Young People in Schools guidance. Is it not morally wrong to teach our children that they could be born in the wrong body, and wrong that it's to teach them that it's possible to change one's sex? So why, despite the Cass findings, is the Scottish Government continuing to allow and indeed encourage gender ideology in schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the Implications for Scotland report commissioned by the Chief Medical Officer set out the Cass Review recommendations, which have been accepted, and they are relevant to gender identity healthcare improvement in NHS Scotland. It also recommends how such clinical services should be best delivered within NHS Scotland, and the report commissioned by the Chief Medical Officer report is now being acted on. But neither that report nor the Cass Review itself examined or considered education settings, and I think that point is important. The Cass Review's remit was to consider NHS England provided healthcare for children and young people seeking clinical support for their gender identity via NHS clinical services. So such services are not provided by schools or by school staff. I am very clear that it is not the role of schools or school staff to encourage or practically support a young person in their decision about their own gender identity. That is a matter for the young person and their families. Recognising the importance of ensuring our guidance to schools is up to date as possible, as I have indicated in my previous response, the guidance for schools will be updated to reflect any relevant changes and information in relation to gender identity services in Scotland as appropriate.
I'm going to invent a word now. I'm going to coin a phrase. It's a new political philosophy, and it's Swinnyism. We've had Thatcherism and Blairism. I said Swinnyism. Scotland is currently being run on the philosophy of Swinnyism. So what is Swinnyism? Swinnyism is to approach every issue just from the point of view of bureaucratic jargon. We formed a committee. We followed the process. We've done this. We've got an action plan. We're going to review it while completely ignoring the core moral issue. So Fergus Ewing says it's wrong to tell children that they've been born the wrong sex. This is morally wrong. And the reply from the Education Secretary, does she come back and say, well, no, that's not true. It's not morally wrong. It's the right thing to do. That's what we do. This is why we do it. Because it is possible for a child to be born in the wrong body and to be, misgendered at birth, and changing gender is the right thing. That's what we believe. That's why we have guidelines based on that. Why doesn't she say that? Why doesn't she just explain what the government believes and what's in their policy, because this has been run on the basis of the political philosophy, political ideology of Swineyism, where you never reply to the heart of the matter. You ignore the heart of the matter and just talk about committees and reports and processes and whatever, in the hope that people will forget about it. But that's so frustrating listening to this, isn't it? I mean, she's put on the spot. I mean, maybe his question could have put her on the spot more. If he'd have said, is it wrong to tell children that they can change sex? Keep the question really short and pointed, and then it's harder to waffle your way out. I mean, she still would waffle her way out of it, but it would be more obvious that that's what happened. And the other thing as well, I mean, Fergus Ewing citing the Cass review. I think some people sort of on our side, if you like, people who disagree with transgender ideology, they see the Cass review as something that's really come in and change the climate completely. I mean, this is really a breakthrough for us. It's not. The Cass review is written by a doctor, and it's addressing things from a medical point of view, not a philosophical point of view. She doesn't address the issue of, like, can a man become a woman? Is sex change possible? Is gender change possible? She doesn't address that. All she does is say, no, what happens with this treatment? What happens with this treatment? In fact, if you read the Cass review, she takes it for granted that there is such a thing as a transgender person. She takes it for granted that some people are transgender. And then her question is, what's the best way to help them? So she's found that helping young people, or trying to help young people by giving puberty blockers, there isn't evidence that that works. So she's not saying, whoa, forget this whole idea of young people changing gender. This is completely wrong. I reject this completely. She's not saying that. She's saying, obviously, that might be true for some young people, but we need not to rush into it. And we need to make sure that the treatments we give have got proper evidence for them. That's what she's saying. So it's very limited in its scope. Unlike the Family Party, of course, which goes for the pulling the trans ideology up by the roots approach. Man can't become a woman can't become a man. And that is it. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Education Secretary and the former leader of the Scottish Labour Party have indeed got married. The two women have got married recently. I seem to remember seeing that. So Fergus Ewing, what would I say to Fergus Ewing? I would say, right, so if this is immoral, what's going on in schools, do you want to resign from the SNP? Is this a red line issue for you? Like teaching lies to children, lies that are going to negatively affect their lives? That sounds like a pretty big deal to me. Are you still supporting the SNP? Should people still vote for it? A party that will put this into practice? Well, to be honest, I think Fergus Ewing is probably going to get suspended again before too long if he keeps this up. We shall see. Right, it's coming up to 10 o'clock. I'll save this little bit for next week. Right, basically in Edinburgh, I think a lot of cities around Scotland now, there's 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. In Wales, it was a big controversy. The Welsh Labour government brought in 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and they're very unpopular. In Scotland, it was done a bit more piecemeal, but all councils seem to be doing it. They all seem to be following suit. My view is it's excessive. It's driven by, I guess, the anti-car agenda. And do you think they'll stop at 20? Will that be it? No, of course not. Once they've got 20 zones, they will expand. So whereas now 40, they'll want it down to 30. Then they'll want it down to 20. I mean, 20, that'll probably, they'll want it down to 10 or whatever. So this will be an ongoing process. And the problem is, who's the group that represents the interests of people who just want to drive around perfectly sensibly at a sensible and perfectly safe speed as well? Who represents those people? Who represents the people who like sit there behind someone going at 20 miles an hour? And it's so frustrating. You feel like you could get out and walk faster. Who represents those people in the Scottish Parliament? I think often no one. No one. Right, have we got any more? I think, did I talk about that last week? The Sheku Bayo inquiry. So this is the man who died after being restrained by the police. He was high on drugs. He was violent towards the police. Died in police custody. I mean, basically, I don't see any reason for any sort of inquiry into it. But the inquiry into it has so far cost £20 million. £20 million. And the only reason it's going ahead is because Sheku Bayo was black, and people tried to make him into Scotland's George Floyd. And so there's been this push for an inquiry, £20 million spent. So I'll never forget watching the woman police officer who was punched in the back of the head by him and knocked unconscious, being asked if she was racist as she was being punched in the back of the head by him. So the whole thing, total waste of money, politically motivated, and really unfair on the police officers who were doing their job. But now, members of the family who are being used by activist lawyers like this, Anna Arwa, or whatever his name is, you know the one. So he's behind this. He's pushing this for political purposes. So the family are being used as pawns, and the family are saying this inquiry is not good enough. We want it to be broadened. They'll never be happy until the result is this was pure evil racism, and our Sheku was a martyr in some sense. So they want the inquiry widening. What does widening mean? That means spending another 10 or 20 million pounds. And I guess the Scottish government might do it, because if they don't, what will happen? The family will say it's a cover-up. It hasn't been looked into properly. The inquiry didn't cover this, this, and this. That just shows how racist the Scottish government is. So what will John Swinney think? Well, John Swinney think, well, tough. We don't need to spend this extra money. Okay, we may take some flack. They'll call us racist, but we recognize a waste of money when we see it. We're not spending money on this. It's not necessary. Is that going to happen? No. The Scottish government will say, oh, another 20 million. We can spend another 20 million pounds on this. And then that will be a good PR move for us. But the whole thing, say, just completely wrong. They're trying so hard to find a George Floyd. So hard. And will they get one in the end? Well, maybe they will. But I think totally without justification. This is an interesting one. Call for young people to have the legal right to live where they grew up. Now, that's a classic modern way of political thinking, isn't it? So if there's something where people need something, and the government might look at that as an issue, how are we going to solve this issue? Some people think the way you do it is you pass a law and say people have got a right to something. So if you live in some remote Highland village and you want to set up home on your own, there's not many houses in the village, and you can't afford one, then what happens? Well, generally around the whole of Britain, if you can't afford a house, then there's maybe social housing, or you just need to get a small house or whatever. But it can be a particularly acute problem in these small communities, maybe where there's a lot of holiday homes, etc. So there's a problem, a real problem. I think sustaining these communities is very important. So what's the way to solve it? Well, the fundamental way to solve it is to enable more house building. If there's demand for houses, there will be profit in builders building houses. There will be profit in landowners parceling off bits of land and saying, I'm going to build on them. They can make huge profits out of that. So that is the market process through which an adequate supply of housing can be created. Now, obviously, there's a delay in that. The fact if one couple want a house in a tiny little village, that doesn't mean the market's going to make a house pop up immediately for those. But overall, that process should be functioning. I mean, even if you're just one couple, there must be landowners where you could say, could we buy a tiny little bit of land off you and make it worth far more than it would otherwise be worth, because we'd like to build a house on it, get a mortgage, build a house on it, and that's great. So the government could look at that process and see how it can help that, and help with planning laws, etc. Maybe some social housing. They're sensible things to look at. But the idea that you pass a law saying you've got a legal right to live where you grew up. I mean, where you grew up for how many years? Which years? Live how close? Live in what sort of house? But it just seems a bizarre way to do it. So you give people this right. And so you get someone who says, right, I want to move out of my mum and dad's house now. I want a house on my own. Right. Do I need to save up for a deposit? Do I need to see what I can afford? Maybe something down the road might do. Maybe I could look at building something. Maybe I could find someone to share with. No, forget all that. You don't need to think about all that, because you've got a right to a house. You go to the government and say, I've got a right. If you don't give me a house, I'm going to take you to court. I mean, really. But that is typical, let's say, of a contemporary political thinking. We'll pass a law and give people a right to it. That'll solve the problem. People don't need the right to houses, they need houses and the opportunity to get a house. And that's where the government should be focusing its attention. I think we're almost there. Yep. Right, let's just have a final look at the comments we've got there. Silly law. Simple fix. The council shouldn't be so restrictive on house building. That is the UK-wide situation. Planning is incredibly restrictive. Basically, if you want to build anything or do anything, be that housing or some sort of industrial development, business, whatever you want to do, there are so many hurdles to get over. The environmentalists will say the lesser spotted wood snipe or something is nesting in the area, and then there'll be. Everyone will have a say that the increased traffic will be a problem. Okay, these might be valid issues, but the balance has gone too far to make it too difficult to actually get anything done. So if you want people to be able to stay in certain areas, then allow house building. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made out of house building, basically. So if the opportunity is there, people will do it. Businesses and individuals can do it as well. People will build houses where there is demand. So just make that possible. Right, there's a case in Braemar. A local joiner was given land by a local estate. He was going to build a house. The council rejected it due to drainage. Less of that would solve it. Yeah, I mean, classic case. So a person wants to build himself a house in the Highlands. A landowner wants to sell a tiny little bit of land to him, but the council will find some reason to stop it. Yeah, classic case. So the government creates the problem, then thinks they're going to, instead of saying, oh, right, we realize we're creating the problem, we'll stop creating the problem. Instead they think, right, we'll carry on creating the problem, but we'll come up with a way of solving it as well. And yeah, things often don't work out the way people expected them to. Right, nice to see you in there. Up in the northeast in Aberdeenshire, we've got a candidate in the council election there. Phil Reynolds has been campaigning. So if I can't remember the name of the wards, but I've got a couple of candidates over there. I'm actually the candidate in Collinson and Fairmile Head, again, for a council by-election. And we have another candidate or two around the country. I can't remember them at the moment, but we'll publish those on social media before too long. There's lots of council by-elections because particularly Labour councillors got elected as MPs. So there's now a vacancy. So we're standing in a lot of by-elections. Right. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. I look forward to seeing you at the conference. Book your tickets. I will see you next week. Right. Good night.